Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode, at the request of Mandrake 9 to 5, we're going to talk all about central themes and story ideas for Demon the Fallen Chronicles. But before we even begin talking about the plot and story hooks, we need to look to the setting. We need to look at the very world in which the action takes place, and to that end, we're going to glance over the storytelling chapter of the core book. I will remind anyone who is listening that this is only the world and setting as described in the core book, so each storyteller might have their own variations and preferences. And actually, I will just read some passages from the book itself. I quote, "The world of Demon is a darker, bleaker reflection of our own. As you envision the details of the setting, there are some crucial elements to keep in mind. The fallen have returned to a world that has forgotten them. The relentless march of technology and reason has made a mockery of faith, equating belief in the divine with childlike ignorance or the delusions of the mad. People still attend church or pray in the direction of Mecca, but it's only lip service to institutions that let them justify their excesses and vilify those with whom they disagree. Modern churches are made of glass and steel with high-tech sound systems in place of a choir or their own TV studio to get the call for contributions out to the masses. Centuries of greed, violence, and fear have alienated humanity from the divine. Prayers go unanswered, innocents continue to suffer, and acts of generosity and compassion are invitations to be victimized. God, as the famous line once read, is dead in the hearts and minds of humanity. Coupled with the poisoning of human faith is a pervasive cynicism in human nature and the decay of the fabric of society. Violence and despair are endemic. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and no one believes that things are going to get any better. Humanity is rotting from within, continuing a sad, slow decline, and symbols of its decay are everywhere in the weathered facades of great Gothic churches and granite office buildings. Amid soulless towers of steel and glass might sit an abandoned cathedral, whose stained glass is rich with color and beauty from a time now lost. Such a place serves as a haunting reminder of what might have been or could be again. The world has lost its heroes. They were caught in sex scandals or taking bribes, or perhaps they fell victim to urban violence. There is no strong leadership, no faith in politicians, or belief in a better tomorrow. People know better. The sky is thick with pollutants, and the seas are burial grounds for the uncounted tons of chemicals and other wastes. The climate is growing steadily hotter, unleashing brutal droughts and terrible storms, and rising waters threaten coastal cities and islands. The newspapers are full of stories predicting that a terrible catastrophe is looming, and many people cannot shake the dread that humanity is in its final days. As wars and rumors of wars sweep the globe, and the earth writhes and seethes with heat, even the fallen believe that the end of the world is soon at hand. These points illustrate the essence of the world of darkness, and they are important because they heighten the dilemmas that your characters face as they fight against their demonic nature. Despair and resignation are all around them. Violence and death are common. What is one more killing, one more lie? How much difference can one person, even an angel, make? Virtues such as courage and compassion are hard to find and even harder to maintain, but it is the struggle for them that is important. This struggle is the source of the game's triumph and tragedy, and the decisions you make in developing your setting should take this into account. It is important to point out that you don't have to adhere religiously to these concepts, and the degree to which you emphasize them is strictly a matter of personal taste. The only truly important thing to remember is that your environment should be one in which doing the right and honorable thing is difficult and daunting. Now, I will always recommend playing into these settings because a lot of the mechanics are tailored to this kind of world, to this kind of portrayal. If the fictional mortals who inhabit this setting don't feel weak, oppressed, needy, scared, inadequate, why would they make a pact with a fallen entity? A strong, mature person who's learned to accept the aspects they cannot change about themselves and the world, but has been working towards achieving their dreams, unlocking their potential in all ways that were possible, and has been making their little corner of the world a better place for quite some time now. Someone who has gained self-confidence and self-reliance after just crushing it every step of the way, overcoming hardship after hardship, becoming accustomed to discomfort, becoming accustomed to being on their own, enduring their pains without letting said pains deform their character. Well, such a person has no need for demonic pacts. This is exactly the kind of mortal Lucifer tried to form and awaken. This is what he rebelled for, right? But no, the world of darkness is not a nice, plentiful place where the majority of kind, responsible people are happy and fulfilled, where communities are tightly knit, safe and inclusive, and the educational and legal systems work fairly. If we want to portray that infernal glory Demon tries to illustrate, we need a world that resonates with what the fallen have become, but at the same time contrasts that Edenic world they wanted to create as architects of the Giver. In this setting, the core book suggests 3 types of story moods, or story modes, or story types, whatever you want to call them, which in my experience don't have to be mutually exclusive, as the game can beautifully oscillate between them. We have the operatic chronicle, which deals with epic themes on a grander scale, and as such, these types of stories tend to de-emphasize the slow burn, gritty and mundane aspects of the setting, focusing more on bold, supernatural, fast-paced action, characters who might be larger than life, who still hold ancient feuds and grudges. They might hope for forbidden romances, devilish schemes, or fiendish plots all around. Humanity overall takes a backseat in these kinds of stories, as regular mortals, pacts, or thralls are something to be used and abused by the infernal protagonists whose conflicts threaten to destroy sizable chunks of what's left of the world, spiraling out of control like tornadoes pulling everything toward them. If their end is tragic, the world is reduced to ashes along with the protagonist. If their ending is triumphant, the protagonists who now hold a piece of the world in the palm of their hands might heal creation, might destroy all the threats to both themselves and to mortals in an entire city. They might elevate their human servants to unimaginable heights of power and influence as their beloved thralls bring about a new age, a utopia. This chronicle is suited for experienced protagonists who are very much attuned with their demonic nature. They remember a multitude of celestial events, and the world as it is now isn't too scary, but more of a dangerous playground. It's unfamiliar, but it's not necessarily frightening. Then comes the Visceral Chronicle, a story mainly focused on the mundane, horrifying small details of being a confused, barely alive human being with a demon under their skin. This type of story de-emphasizes the grandiose, supernatural stuff and aims to present the gritty, tragic struggles of mortals who are just beginning to realize that their recent states of confusion, the emotional liability, the insomnia, the panic attacks, the horrifying nightmares are the result of possession after they almost died or outright died. The true nature of the symbiosis with the fallen spirit is still a mystery to them, and the characters are doing their best to carry on with their regular lives while discovering there's others like them out there, ones who are considerably more powerful, but considerably less benevolent, and must be kept at bay. Even when the protagonists use their superpowers, they do so sparingly and discreetly without world-changing events. Their understanding of the lore is very limited, and a lot of things are just frightening and new. So this type of chronicle is excellent for leaning more into the horror Demon the Fallen has to offer, mainly suited for stories which begin a few scenes before the possession. And then we come to the middle ground, the cinematic chronicle, which makes the best of both worlds, alternating between moments of intense, albeit not exactly grandiose, epic action, more like intrigue and mystery, which bring out the character's celestial side, and moments of mundane worries, relationships, nice moments spent with family, friends, and all of those things that offer a fallen solace from their memories and supernatural nature. Of course, the larger conflict and all the things that are threatening your protagonist never take a break when you decide to play mortal. So, infernal matters always threaten to ruin the stability and the comfort of mundane life. They threaten to hurt you and your loved ones, to reveal your nature to them, or draw attention from various other predators of your kind, from earthbound to hunters. Can your character balance these two aspects, given their current situation? And if I may linger on this topic a little more, I want to point out that Vampire, for example, rips the protagonists away from the life they knew, their families, their jobs, and so on. You were stalked, observed over a period of time on a nightly basis, maybe, embraced with the cost of your blood and your life. You were literally killed, and now you are introduced into a completely new society which functions by its own rules exclusively. You cannot hold on to previous relationships lest you risk violating the traditions. You are only awake and about at night, and you're addicted to human blood. You don't get your precious drug, you go into a mindless frenzy attacking everyone around you, or you endure that hunger heroically until you sink into torpor. Mortals in Vampire the Masquerade risk becoming nothing but herd, prey, these faceless blood bags that walk about, which you can jump in a dark alleyway. But you don't care about them. You don't want to get to know them. They can be seen as just blood receptacles. In contrast to this, mortals in Demon the Fallen are a collective main character who never really gets left behind, lost in the scenery, or completely eclipsed by the protagonist's deals and doings. And I'm pointing this out because Mandrake specifically asked, how do we keep a demon game from becoming a VTM game with angels instead of vampires? Which is an excellent question, by the way. Well, this is one of those distinctive elements, the way the setting regards humanity. In Demon, you're not necessarily addicted to faith, and by that I mean you won't die without it. It's not a resource that drains out of you on a daily basis, like vampires spend vitae to awaken each night, nor is it a cost you absolutely need to pay to assume your apocalyptic form or use the first 3 dots of any lore. If a fallen protagonist isn't threatened, attacked, pushed to their limit, and so on, they can hold on to a faith pool of 3 for months without the need to make a pact or reap. So the addiction theme is not a core part of this story as it is for Vampire. The nocturnal isolation, the empty streets, the wet asphalt glistening in neon light, the noise of faraway clubs and raves is completely replaced with a distinct type of loneliness which is felt constantly despite the fact that you are surrounded by people. In Demon, you keep all of your backgrounds, you have your family, you have your job, you can just pretend to be mortal and keep the masquerade, going as much as you like, but the burning pain of being surrounded by broken people who are in various stages of giving up on everything, in the ruins of a world which was once your creation, knowing full well the masters you served are coming, and the earthbound are already here. The pain is constant and forces you to take action, do something, change something. But everything you do revolves around humanity, whether you feel love for mortals and want to protect them, or you do so out of guilt, or you feel just rage and you want to end them. It's about them. It always has been. If they had fulfilled their destiny, becoming aware and responsible keepers of a paradisial world you helped create, you would have been on the bench. You would have been the side character. The only reason you're relevant now and you trick them into making pacts is because they've already failed. Their glory is lost, but at least it no longer eclipses your infernal fallen glory. So now you get to shine through a little bit. In order to receive their faith, though, it's not enough to jump them in a barely illuminated back street like they're just herd, just animals carrying blood. But you need to get to know them, all of their fears and regrets, all of their aspirations and dreams. You will look them in their tearing eyes and see their quivering lips when they finally break down and confess their inadequacies, real or imagined. The darkest parts of who they think they are, along with all their hidden little fantasies and desires. You might even carry them across the threshold of a new day when their feet are bloodied and broken from the endless march of this day, the endless, thankless 9-to-5 march of every day. And hopefully you can now see why my favorite type of chronicle is the cinematic chronicle, because I love having the supernatural element surrounding a very visceral game, a very visceral core, which is ultimately not about demons, but about people. Fictional, yet inspired by real people, like you and me, faced with various types of conflict. This brings us to conflicts, since that's what plots and story hooks are. Conflicts which demand resolution or some kind of conclusion. Conflict in Demon the Fallen is multidimensional, multilateral. On the one hand, there are various kinds of internal conflicts, a clash of personal desires, like when the protagonist doesn't know whether they should reveal their supernatural natures to their close ones for fear of exposing them to quite a serious and traumatic revelation, or when said protagonists aren't really sure they still serve the ideals of their faction. These conflicts, strictly internal, personal, tend to demand a slower pace when it comes to resolution, right? They cannot find an immediate resolution, and they don't yet affect the world that is external to the character, but rather they might forewarn of a potential change and a potential course of action. So now we move on to internal conflict that actively pushes towards action and affects the external world. Say you've just remembered your celestial lover's name. You invoke them and realize they are either destroyed or haven't left the pit yet because there is no response, there is no connection. What do? The desire to have them here burns within you, and you cannot help but start elaborating a summoning ritual which will hopefully achieve the desired effect, bringing your lover back to you while you gather all the necessary participants and ritual paraphernalia. This is a personal conflict that the character can actively work towards resolving every single session, one tiny step at a time. And eventually, it will change something about the world. In this case, it will bring something, another character, into the world. So what begins as a strictly internal conflict can always spill into the external world. Like, say, when your protagonist realizes they've lost almost all loyalty and respect for their faction. They want to defect, they need to defect. So this demands action. How? How does one do that? So you can have all of these internal conflicts, which of course are brought to the table by the players themselves when they create their characters. And in portraying and pursuing these personal quests, air quotes, you make the player feel empowered and you shine the spotlight on their protagonist, reminding them that this is their story, right? They're not just along for the ride, you're not railroading them. No, we are collectively pursuing and resolving the conflict they brought to the table. Other times, however, very immersive personal conflict is modified and brought on by an external source. So, the storyteller. Say the protagonist successfully summons their lost lover, achieving their personal goal. Great! What they didn't know is that I, as storyteller, made their lover a Torment 8 Ravener. Yes, the beloved Celestial you spent Edenic times with is now a miserable, demonic entity which cannot help but hurt the world around it. Your lover is no more. From the pit, you've released a monster who is actively hunting and killing mortals as we speak. So what happens now? They won't listen to you. They don't owe you anything. You can't control them, even though you deeply care about them. And the more they mess things up around the city, other demons notice, and they demand you bring in your lover's head, or you will be stripped of status and removed from the local court, exiled forever. And that is external conflict knocking at your door. How do you respond? What happens now? A great demon who once knew your true name and forced you into servitude during your imprisonment has just made it out of the pit. They invoke you and demand a confirmation and show of allegiance. You are to slay your oldest mortal son, since you do have a mortal family. Do this, and they will not pursue how your name has warped since your release. They will not aim to command you by your true name. Disobey them, and they will discover every single minor change that has occurred to your name. And once they have all the current syllables, they will command you into servitude. Not only that, but they will command you into murdering your entire family, just for their laughs. What happens now? External conflict spilling in. Two choices present themselves, but maybe there's more. What do you do? And sometimes the conflict itself isn't clear at all. It's abstract. You don't know who is behind the conflict. It comes in the form of a mystery to be uncovered, a random event that seems to make no sense and seems to have no immediate actors. You wake up one morning and all the birds in the neighborhood are dead. Crows, pigeons, you name it. As you wake up and look out from your window, you see avian carcasses littering the streets and sidewalks everywhere. Locals are confused. News crews are on the scene. Some lady is just sweeping the feathery corpses in front of her place of business like they're nothing. You know, like this whole thing just means nothing to her. Just another day at the store. And their plumage is stained with their own blood as they seemingly died from falling mid-flight. They just fell mid-flight. Their wings just stopped working and they fell to their deaths. Some landed on their beaks, which are chipped, and some broke their wings and legs when they hit the concrete. Everywhere you look, the asphalt is just covered in dead birds, crows, and pigeons. And how does something like this happen? What does it mean? The conflict is unclear. There's no immediate antagonist. There's no immediate choice to be made further than, do I try to get to the bottom of this or do I ignore it? Another example. At the first hour of dawn, people discover an important local political figure, let's say it's the mayor, is hanging from the tall metal post of a street lamp downtown. His face and tongue swollen blue, swollen to twice their normal size. One of his eyes effectively popped out of his socket, a look of utter horror on his tumefied purple face, and around his neck, hanging downward from his shoulders, tied with his own shoelaces. He's not wearing any shoes at the moment. So tied in his own shoelaces, a thin wooden sign written in blood which reads, "Caraxiel was here," followed by a smiley face emoji. What the hell does that mean? Why would anyone do something of this magnitude? Shining so much light on every single fallen in the city, right? They're driving law enforcement crazy. Who's Caraxiel? Why did they just hang the bleeding mayor? So, you see, story hooks are everywhere, really. They can be flashy or more discreet, but as long as they have that element of miracle and mystery to them, they are quite in line with the Infernal Glory vibe. It can be something that happens to a thrall, a fallen NPC, local fauna, or the entire mortal population of the city, such as a mysterious illness with gruesome symptoms, an ever-growing missing persons list, someone's memory being wiped clean, the disappearance or appearance of a malefactor's path or a bastion, why not? A demonic serial killer stalking the streets, a strange, probably cursed artifact being discovered next to a malefactor's host's dead body, a hidden portal leading to a pocket dimension, etc. So you see, again, by comparison to vampire, the supernatural is much more present in demon, but the political themes, though they are there, they can be brought into the foreground, they tend to take a back seat. Whereas in vampire, you can't create magic artifacts on a whim, there's no portal hopping, there's no weird extra-dimensional paths, pocket dimensions, or bastions, and in vampire, you don't even get too many illusions, since Shimmerstry is strictly the property of Ravnos. In demon, the fiends can blanket entire buildings in illusions, right? You can have hidden little chambers within a certain building that mortals don't know anything about. They don't know these rooms are there, right? You can make buildings appear run down, abandoned, filthy, all of that stuff, right? Keeping mortals away, while the other fallen who are resistant to illusion, they know this is only a facade. This is how they protect their gathering places, maybe the places where they hold court. So again, story hooks and conflicts can be everywhere. It can start from anything, even an illusion. But now we get to the biggest conflict of them all, the plot. From my experience, there are a few key plot ideas for Demon, and given that there's so much variation to the protagonists themselves and the stories they tell, it's no shame to just reuse one plot from one chronicle to the next. I mean, who here hasn't played that Camarilla game where the Sabbat raid or siege the city and the coterie of protagonists is sent to take out a Sabbat pack? Well, that's even the intro to Bloodlines as well, right? It's a Sabbat raid. It's a common plot for vampire. For demon, however, those common plots revolve around uncovering relics from the time of the war, keeping powerful artifacts out of the wrong hands. I'm looking at that uncurrent sarcophagus right now. Surviving the politics of the infernal courts, surviving and maybe even destroying the Earthbound, finding Lucifer, and, well, things like this, which take considerably more than just a single session to achieve. And they can involve a lot of fallen characters within a location, right? As in, the plot ties everyone together, it involves everyone. For instance, an earthbound threat is something everyone needs to take seriously, right? This entity is going to mess things up for everyone. He's going to enslave everyone. Finding Lucifer is a Luciferan's most ardent goal. It's the goal of an entire faction. There are artifacts that can imprison the souls of all mortals within a small neighborhood. You really don't want that to fall into the wrong hands, especially with bands of renegade fallen roaming around and threatening not only the court but the mortals in the city. Maybe there's rumors of a hidden stash of seer in this location. Seer is like this miracle substance the malefactors created, a wonder element which can easily be shaped into pretty much anything, and properties such as density, hardness, weight are also easily changeable. So this is the substance that can do anything. It's like the philosopher's stone of Demon the Fallen. And you can see why such a substance would be of value to any malefactor and any court. Now, since I mentioned my preference for cinematic chronicles, I must confess I tend to alternate quite drastically between the tones and the moods of each story. Maybe one session revolves around a protagonist taking care of his old dying mother with deep emotional roleplay and tear-jerking dialogue, very mundane without any supernatural elements, while the next session, our choir of fallen runs into a nomadic Sabbat pack which happened to pass through the city and decided to have a little blood feast while they're at it. So in this instance, the mood changes completely. It's not mundane, it's not personal, it's not necessarily emotional, and there's not much dialogue, but I'll emphasize narration. I'll get very descriptive, right? The inhumanity of these Canaanites, the stench of blood and death surrounding this entire place, the vicious brutality with which they kidnap and drain their helpless mortal victims, and the frightening disciplines they use. So in this case, the player's own supernatural abilities only add to that feeling of action and otherworldliness, should they decide to assume their apocalyptic form, use their lores, and engage in what is probably some very memorable Infernal Glory combat. Then, in the following sessions, they lay low, tending to mortal affairs while they hear a rumor about the tyrant of the city. We have a few sessions of politicking and intrigue, following up on leads, talking to a lot of NPCs. They reveal some key information about the other fallen in the city, and then bam, they find a path leading to an ancient bastion, which they can explore at their own risk, of course. So you see, you can have this beautiful dance between supernatural and mundane in Demon, a dance between high intensity sessions when protagonists just go nuts using their lores and punching the world along with other supernaturals right in the face, and then things quiet down. They talk to their pacts, they talk to their struggling families, they engage with the court. You see, low intensity, slow burn, intrigue, heavy roleplay, all that good stuff. So that's what I enjoy doing, alternating between tones and moods like that, because I strongly believe World of Darkness Chronicles, for pretty much all of the games, Werewolf, Wraith, you name it, they aren't really about what happens, but how, why, and to whom it happens. See, I believe none of these games would feel the same without their settings, without their moods and tones, and oftentimes these elements are portrayed through the details of each individual chronicle. Plots and stories tend to be limited to a few ideas for each game, really. unless you want to go nuts with it and run vampires versus aliens or something over the top like that. So ultimately, I guess World of Darkness games are kind of like pizza. You know, you order a pizza and you know there's only so many crust types you can have, there's only so many pies to choose from, but hey, the array of ingredients, sauces, and toppings you put on that pizza make all the difference. And there's so many to choose from, so at the end of the day, it's still pizza, right? But no two storytellers run their chronicles the same way. Mandrake 9 to 5, I know you asked me to talk more about plot and story hooks, and in typical old country reply fashion, I ended up talking more about the setting and pizza. But I did this precisely because the portrayal of the world itself is so important for creating that distinct Infernal Glory vibe, you know? If you still want me to create a list of conflicts and stories and plots, I guess I can also do that in a later episode. But yeah, to me it's always about the why, how, and to whom a story happens, rather than what happens. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.